Thank you everyone for joining my webinar on hyperautomation. I'm going to be talking today a little bit about the order to service delivery or provisioning process. And although I'm focusing there, a lot of the strategies that we talk about and the technologies that we talk about deploying are useful in other use cases or lines of business throughout the organization. My name is Brad Steinmeier. I have 25 years of experience in technology. I've worked mostly in the telecom industry, working in every job you could think of, from the network operations center to being a field technician, the service delivery process, running channel sales organizations at some of the larger telcos. Several years ago, I made a career change. I came to Zia Consulting to focus on content management and helping companies solve problems around their content. And naturally, I started recognizing the potential for use cases within the industry that I came from. So I started focusing on use cases and solutions that could help the industry that I came from. And I'm going to speak to one of those today. Like I said, it's on the service to delivery process. And just a little background on Zia. We're Boulder-based. We've been working on content management since 2003. We're a software reseller, system integrator, and consultant. And if somebody asked me, and I got asked a lot when I made the change in career and came to Zia, what does Zia do? I would say that if I had to sum it up, what Zia does is we solve hard problems for companies as it relates to their content. So from ingesting content all the way through the life cycle of content in a company until finally the disposition of content. We work with companies of all sizes, multi-million-dollar companies all the way up to multi-trillion-dollar companies. And we bring to bear our experience. We have several technologies that we leverage. We take a best of breed approach when we're solving these problems for customers and really help them execute. Most hyperautomation, or what used to be called digital transformation strategies, fail. We have a very high success rate. We've never failed on a project to date as a company, and our customers stay with us, as you can see by the 95% retention rate over the lifespan of our company. So what is hyperautomation? Hyperautomation is really a very purposed approach that companies take to identify ways to automate their business and IT processes. It really helps companies do a lot more with fewer people. And this is pretty important during the Great Resignation and as companies are looking to grow and scale, or at least be able to do the same work that they did before with fewer people. And really where we focus on is, how do we automate processes that would typically be performed by humans? Now, I'm going to talk about it again a little bit later. Just because we automate processes that are performed by humans, it doesn't necessarily mean that people should live in fear of having their job displaced. We found, and research has shown, that the automation leads to innovation and growth and actually creates jobs, and that even though some people will be replaced or other people will be repurposed, the growth of the company is a wonderful ROI and justification for hyperautomation. You can see from this chart that what the true value of hyperautomation is. Without hyperautomation, you're doing a lot of work around case creation, data entry, clerical work, compiling information, and performance management. But when you execute to hyperautomation, you really have refocused the work and the energy of your employees around analysis and decision making, and we've automated those portions of the work that are really easily addressed by technologies. And a company that focuses on analysis and decision making is going to be an innovative company that stands out in their vertical. So we talk about problems we solve with hyperautomation. We eliminate the need for humans to manually import, review, and classify data from documents, freeing up resources to improve the performance of the company. We also eliminate the need to hire and train additional employees, and we free up high-level employees to do their job instead of mundane work, and this is pretty important. We ensure that systems run smooth and they're integrated. And this is a big one we'll talk about later when we get into the 6 components of hyperautomation, but we improve compliance and government regulations, or compliance to government regulations. And that's pretty important, internationally, nationally, and as more and more states roll out their crazy quilt patchwork of laws around privacy and governance, it's important to have a system that automates that. And I'll talk more to that in a little bit. So here are 6 components of hyperautomation. We talk about modernized systems. I'm not going to touch on this. I'm going to make the assumption that we've modernized the systems, we've gone cloud when possible, we've gotten off mainframe. But I'm going to really hit home on digitizing core process and new technology. But I'll briefly touch on the automated business process and integrated and innovative systems, and then once again on the automated compliance and governance. So the first step that we're going to cover is digitize core organizational process. These 6 components don't necessarily have to be done in order, and oftentimes they're not. For example, I've got a company that I'm working with that's focused on new technology, specifically RPA, even though they have some manual paper process. But it's so much easier for an organization to take the next 4 steps in digital transformation if you've digitized your core processes and you've eliminated any paper processes that you have. And we'll touch a little bit on that here, especially as it refers to the service to delivery process. I know that as much as 4 years ago, and I revalidated as I was preparing for this webinar with contacts that I have in the industry, that PDFs are still making up the majority of service orders in the industry. So when we talk about the order process current state, orders are submitted to an order entry or sales team. They're verified for accuracy, and then information is inputted into various systems. You got the CRM, order management, provisioning, billing. And it was my experience that this was not only time consuming and created bottlenecks, but there was a lot of errors, and orders get lost or orders get delayed. I seem to remember that at the beginning and the end of the month, there was a huge influx of orders that would come in, and it would create what I call the pig and the snake. And these orders would just work their way through the systems, and you would create a bottleneck at each stage after a large influx of orders, or if there were seasonal or promotional increases in orders, this became quite a problem. And it wasn't very scalable. Companies weren't really keen to overhire for this process, because then the provisioning process becomes very, very expensive. So when we talk about removing the paper process and manual data entry, it really sets the stage for us to leverage technologies down the road like RPA. But even if you didn't, we have technologies that allow us to integrate with your systems to take those PDF documents as they come in, and to review those PDFs with intelligent document capture, extract the information off of that, and then feed it into those various systems. So we recently did a little proof of concept where we took orders from sample orders from various companies in the telecom industry and fed those through our intelligent document capture system. And you can see 3 examples. We did a couple cable companies and National Elect. We fed those orders in. We programmed the system to capture, I think, 9 or 10 key value fields. And if you look at these success rates, where we were able to correctly classify each order 90, 97, 96, and 100% of the time. And then when you look at the extraction off of those orders, we had 99, 100, and 87% accuracy on the extraction. It doesn't mean that the fields that we couldn't extract, we extracted incorrectly. In most cases, the system wasn't confident enough as it read the PDF to say, yes, this is the information that we want and it's correct. So what it did was it didn't capture that. And the way the system's set up is the order entry team, or what we call the operators, will go in, they log in, and they start handling the exceptions instead of reviewing the whole order. So if you look at 99.6% accuracy and you extrapolate that over the entire order volume for a company, think about all the people that frees up from doing that manual data entry. As I go through these technologies, please feel free to send a note to the moderator if this is something that you would like to see a demo of. I didn't include a demo of any of the technologies that we're talking about because I wanted to touch briefly on each component of hyperautomation and digital transformation, and I didn't feel that we had time in the webinar to actually show the demo. So I'm happy to do a sidebar or set up another meeting for individuals that want to see that. So as you can see, pretty impressive results. If all your orders that came in throughout the month were fed into the system, information was pulled out, and then we distribute that information to your systems, you can see that it'd free up a lot of time. But more importantly than the time that it'd free up, you would cut days off what I call briefcase time, the time that an order is signed until it gets provisioned, and you're going to increase customer satisfaction. Another huge impact that this will have is in channel sales. We know that the channel sales group has a choice on the providers that they represent, and companies that are performing, they tend to migrate to. They can turn their orders in and move on to the next sale, knowing that it's going to be provisioned correctly and quickly. I'm going to touch briefly on automated business processes. So why do we automate? The purpose of automation, is to increase customer satisfaction. And whether that's your internal or external customers is pretty important. It's also future-proofing. If you're a company that's in growth mode, or you bring on a new product line that's in growth mode, it's going to allow you to scale. I think it's also important that these systems or these automated processes are agile and nimble. We leverage technologies that are either low code or no code and are not a huge lift for IT. And that's pretty key. Historically, big monolithic systems around provisioning or order delivery have been a long and tedious implementation that required a lot of IT work to implement and a lot of IT work to change as the needs change for the line of business. And we know that putting in nimble, low code or no code technologies is important to both IT and the line of business. I touched on it a little earlier. We've got to, when we talk about automating processes, and if you're a company that's trying to build a culture of hyperautomation, it's really important that it's really important for you to remove that fear of replacement culturally within your organization. It's true, some people will be replaced, some people are going to be repurposed, but anytime we've worked in an organization and we've worked with the line of business and that fear of replacement was there, it really inhibited the company's ability to hyperautomate or delayed the process as we kind of fought through the fear. And we have a lot of different ways to address this. I think having a great automation vision and plan up front, communicating regularly with the employees about what that vision means for the organization from a growth and revenue or stock performance standpoint, sitting down with the organization, at the beginning and talking about how there is going to be a very purposed and mindful repurposing of employees and only replacement when an employee just is not able to be repurposed. One of the things that we found too is that companies kind of take a ready, fire, aim approach to hyperautomation and automating their business processes. What we've really been with our methodology, we focus on what the company's desired end state is, and as a consulting company, we haven't worked within this organization for the last 20 years, like a lot of the line of business employees. So we don't really take a view of, well, we can't automate this system and here's why, or we're not, we've always done it this way and here's why we can't do that. We start with the future state, what the company wants to accomplish, and we don't have those restraints. And we help guide that company through hard decisions and as I said earlier, solving hard problems around automation. The next component that I'm going to talk about is integrative and innovative systems. And this is important. It really helps the knowledge workers succeed. And when I talk about helping the knowledge workers succeed, one of the strategies that we leverage is called federation. And it's really designed to create a unified view and access to data throughout the organization. And this is pretty important because in most cases, knowledge workers work in what I call a swivel chair environment, multiple screens on the desks of the knowledge worker with whatever line of business. And I see it all the time in the provisioning group or the service delivery group. You have the multiple monitors up and you have 3 or 4 different systems that you're accessing, and you're moving data between those systems or from one system to the other manually with copy and paste function, or you're going in and looking into systems for information. And the latest statistic that I read was 61% of knowledge workers access 4 or more systems, and as much as 15% access 11 or more systems. This is and employees learn to do their job. It amazes me how often I look at an employee and kind of, we're trying to learn their business logic or business rules, and I watch them do their work, and I think to myself, how long does it take someone new to learn this job? Because there are so many different systems that they're bouncing in and out of. One of the stats that I read recently is that for every 1,000 workers, about $5.7 million is wasted with employees looking for information but not finding it. So we create that unified view, federating systems together, and allows those knowledge workers to have access, and it allows for seamless transfer of data. The other thing when you talk about federation is data is everywhere within an organization. And when we touch on compliance and governance, it's important that that systems have seamless access to each other so that we can manage that data and compliance throughout the organization, and that something's not missed and putting the company in compliance jeopardy. The other big point is customers. I don't know, we've all been in a situation where as a customer we've called into somewhere, a vendor of ours of some kind, where we're asking for access to information, and I think I've had a very recent experience around this where through mergers and acquisition, a service provider of some kind of mine, where I'd happen to have service with the acquiring and the acquired company, I call in for a billing question, and they have access to part of my data, but not the other part. So I get bounced around a lot. And we all know that's frustrating. I think customers more and more are high on demand for that seamless experience. So we can talk about federation and some of the strategies we use around that later. And it's also key to setting up the automated compliance and governance. So, another portion about, or another reason to talk about integrated and innovative systems is we're seeing more and more companies transition to ecosystem sales. Amazon's a great example of ecosystems. They have their platform, they have suppliers, and or a cell phone company might run a special where you get access to the NFL network. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that ecosystem sales are really becoming more and more prevalent. And if systems are integrated and innovative, then it allows for that in a more practical way. As I talked about, we eliminate the swivel chair process. We leverage APIs to tie the systems and processes together when possible. When not possible, we leverage RPA bots. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And we really, it really sets the company up to focus on internal and external collaboration. And one of the use cases that that I was thinking about as I've gone on this journey at Zia is, I do a lot of work with the technology solutions distributors. They used to be called master agents. And in most cases, the technology solution distributor is taking orders in from their sales force, and they do a certain amount of data entry, whether that's automated or not, into their systems. And then the order gets shipped over to the service providers. And it was natural for me to say, well, why aren't you integrated with the service providers? And in most cases, the answer is it's too sophisticated, and so you have these, legacy systems at the service providers that aren't able to integrate. And I just think about if that order came in and we captured that information off of that order, and it was instantly fed into the technology service distributors systems and then fed directly into the service providers provisioning systems, how much time would that cut off the provisioning process? It would be game changing from both a sales force standpoint. If I'm an agent out selling solutions, I know that my order got fed into the system and is being provisioned right away. I can tell customers, look, you're going to have service from this provider in a very short period of time, and here's why. It reduces the human error factor, but it just cuts out so much of that briefcase time that I talked about earlier. And the need for several hands at different organizations to touch it is eliminated because we've innovated those systems together and tied them together. The next component that I want to talk about is automated compliance and governance. This is a big one. We consistently see companies just struggle to be effective with their compliance and governance. The processes are very manual at most organizations and require extensive work when change is required. And there's one thing that we know about compliance and governance: if it's not automated, it will not be done correctly. And so a lot of organizations are at risk and they're not compliant. They get a request, a right to be forgotten request is a great example, where the customer calls in and wants their data removed from the organization. They go into some systems if they can, and they remove that data, but they're not able to provide a full audit log. And time again, we just kind of see companies sticking their head in the sand, around compliance and governance. And what we know is going to start happen with HIPAA, where the oversight for HIPAA started leveraging huge fines for organizations that weren't compliant. So that's going to, a lot of companies that are at risk now become at even greater risk later. And when we help companies implement ECM or new systems or address their hyperautomation, we really put a focus on hyperautomating the compliance and governance. ZIA has a proprietary technology that we use called privacy aware governance, and it leverages some various technologies to allow companies to at least come into compliance and ubiquitously remain in compliance across all the variant systems that they have. The risk is too high to wager that human error is not going to happen in this case. So it's important that you address all your content. You leverage agile, intelligent workflows to enforce the policies. And once again, those are the low code, no code workflows that I spoke to. And you employ some analytics tools to ensure that the policies are working and that you can audit your company in real time. And if companies aren't there today and they're ignoring this, this is something that I highly suggest that they get ahead of. When I speak to companies, the biggest problem is like, I don't know how to start and where to begin. And that's fortunately that's a hard problem that ZIA helps solve. So, when we talk about it, compliance and governance, I mean, it's just a fact. When it's easier, it happens. When we leverage some of the automated processes, the digitization that we talked about earlier, it just makes it more intuitive for employees to do. And as I said earlier, the crazy quilt patchwork of compliance with each state coming up with their own rules and processes, we know that it's fluid. We know that things will change. And so having that system be agile enough to address the changes in the process without being a huge lift for IT is important. And like I said earlier, we only introduce manual touch when necessary. So only handle the exceptions. Let's automate the majority of the compliance and governance process, and let companies, one, be able to share with their customers that they have their privacy protected, but also focus on other hard problems within the organization to solve. So finally, the last component that I'm going to talk about is leveraging new technologies. And this can mean several new technologies. It could be a new, more modern line of business applications, but really where I get excited is when we start talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and more and more over the last couple of years, I'm seeing RPA as probably the most beneficial, quickest win tool for providing an ROI or improving customer satisfaction or helping companies take that initial step to robotic process, or to hyperautomation. And why I get excited about RPA is that when companies set out on their hyperautomation journey, it feels a little bit to them like, I got to boil the ocean, because if I want to automate this piece, then I've created a backlog in this area. And if I want to automate this piece, it just creates problems down my supply chain. And what I like about robotic process automation is we can insert that into any step of, or any step of the process for a company in pretty much any line of business that has manual processes. And when I think about it from the service delivery provisioning process, it's probably, aside from or in line with digitizing the core processes, getting rid of the PDFs or intelligently capturing the PDF. It is the single most the single best tool for providing that ROI and getting rid of the bottleneck. And I'm gonna share a little bit about what we can do. So first, we improve agility and scalability with RPA, and this addresses that pig in the snake comment that I made earlier, that I always saw at the beginning and the end of the months, when there would be a massive influx of orders that would then again drop off, later in the month. Since the bots work around the clock, and we can always add more bots to a specific process, it's very easily scales up and down. It also eliminates the manual data entry piece, and so we've hopefully eliminated a lot of it with the digitization and feeding into systems. But there are some systems that companies are required to work with, that there's not open access or an API where we can feed data in. We can certainly train a bot to do that manual data entry. So let's capture these key value fields. Let's log into this external system, and input this information into that system, and let's do it with 100% accuracy and very quickly. We can also know that it's very secure, and will help out with the automated governance compliance, because we can apply encryption around sensitive data, or PII, and we don't have employees that are accessing that PII, and we're not sending a PDF or some other document around from step to step to step where it might get lost, or it might get exposed, or, like I said, employees, whether it's credit card information or date of birth and personal information, driver license, the bots capturing that information and putting where it needs to go, and not a human. And as I said earlier, we can experience a very fast ROI. We're able to quickly deploy RPA bots at midstream, at the beginning of the stream, anywhere along the process, and train those bots and get them doing those tasks. So we can prove this out very quickly in an organization. And when I'm going to touch on our methodology at Zia real quick, and getting that quick win is pretty important culturally for organizations, and also for the stakeholders that are sponsoring hyperautomation projects. So these are some of the things that the RPA bots can do. They can open mail attachments, as I said earlier, log into the web or other software, fill in forms, execute if-then decisions. So if this is missing this information, then email the customer or the sales agent or the sales rep. We can pull data off the internet. It's great at performing calculations. And really, there's just so much that it can do. A lot of interaction with, different SaaS services, as well as, regular spreadsheets, documents, PowerPoint. So it's probably, in my opinion, from a hyperautomation standpoint, going to be the most leveraged tool, over the next, 5 years at least, until something more exciting comes on, or AI, becomes more effective. But yeah, so when I talk about our methodology, I call it the 5 Ds of hyperautomation. So we do a discovery, we find out what the pain is. We share with the organization what we can do to solve that pain and what the gain to them is. We make decisions around, hey, do we take your current systems? Do we retire them? Do we replace them? Move them, like rehosting to the cloud to allow for APIs. And when we talk about rewrap and redo, it's putting technologies around them, or integrating with them to make them more useful. And then it goes through the roadmap design process. We start a pilot project or program to deliver that quick win. We really work in that 90-day delivery agile approach. It's depending. Sometimes if we're doing a major replace or rewrap, it can be longer, but it's very important culturally for organizations to get that quick win around around hyperautomation, to see the results, to get an ROI, and instead of trying to boil the ocean and then hope at the end of it, voila, everything works. And so this approach has worked well for our customers. It's worked well for Zia. I can geek out all day long and talk about the technology service provider industry and use cases outside of service delivery and provisioning. So please feel free to reach out to Zia and ask for me. If you're in another industry, we have vertical experts around human capital, finance, insurance, energy, oil, and gas. So please, contact me, and I'll make sure that I get you in touch with the right person if it's not me. I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone that joined the webinar, and I appreciate the time that you spent, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you.